You say you love your man, but he seems more distant, more disinvested, more disenfranchised day after day. And you don't realize that you are simply driving your man out of your life. And like the lady in the picture, that road leads into the horizon, off into the mountains. And the more you drive, the further away he becomes, and perhaps he will never return. Well, folks, that's kind of how things wind up from time to time, and oftentimes you just wonder where things went wrong. And today I'm going to talk to you about, and specifically to you ladies, about how to drive your man completely out of your life. And I'm going to come at it from just simple statistic, and then I'm going to come at it from observation, and then I'm going to come at it from a biblical point of view. And it's going to seem like I have and perhaps it's going to seem like I have an axe to grind, and that's furthest from the case, or that it's just something that doesn't fit you. But I would encourage you to stick with me through the whole video, and I would encourage you specifically to listen and just to take introspect and take a look at what's being said. And in light of specifically the fact that if you want your man to identify with you, to understand your feelings, your emotions, your position, then I would highly encourage you to work to understand his. Now, one thing I want to make sure and clear of is that I am not saying that this is a one-sided coin. It is not. And I'm going to make the point clearer when I get into the biblical perspective, because it is really obvious that a lot of the weight rests on men. But in this day and age, whether it's psychology, theologians, preachers, or whatever, 9 times out of 10, they put the weight on the man to make the wife happy. And men are not called to make their wife happy. It's just not the case. Nor is the wife called to make the man happy. But we're going to get into that perhaps another day. This video is specifically about how to drive your man out of your life. Okay? Now, here's one statistic, and this is basically the only statistic that I really want to share with you today, and that is this. Why is it that women more readily divorce men than men do women? And what do you mean by that, Tim? Well, according to this law firm, a study led by American Sociological Association determined that nearly 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And that percentage of college and educated American women who initiate divorce is even higher. And there are some reasons for that. But I'm going to venture to say that, this statistic has more to do with a lack of perspective on one hand and an incorrect perspective on the other, and that's what I'm going to address. So let's go ahead and get into this. I have written down some things that I would say would be the 10 commandments of women to follow if you want to drive your man out of your life. If that is your goal, or if you're wondering why you're driving your man out of your life, just listen to these 10 commandments. That is really 3 pages worth of things. In other words, way more than 10. And then I'm going to flip it around a little bit, and hopefully you understand what I'm saying. I'm hopefully going to be clear in explaining this from a man's point of view and a biblical point of view. And I want to say this, that if you have chosen your man, and you have chosen your man for specific reasons, and you have found this man to be of marriage quality in every respect, and the qualities that are not what you would like, you have found to forgive, to shove aside, to overlook, or whatever. If that's the case, then why are you struggling so much to not drive your man out of your life? Why is it that the qualities that you chose this man for aren't the overriding qualities that are maintaining your relationship? Do you grasp what I just said? Because if those qualities aren't the qualities, and don't tell me he's changed, because if he has changed, there's specific reasons why he's changed. But don't tell me that these qualities no longer exist in your man, and you can't bear under the load that your man is putting you under. Because if that's the case, then you chose him for what he is, and you are the one that has changed. But let me get into this just a little bit. If you chose this man, why did you choose him? And if you chose this man and given the reasons, then why do you not trust him with your life? Why do you not trust him to, and understand this, why do you not trust him to build your relationship and the life that you want? What are your expectations? And whether you're young or older, but primarily if you start out your marriage in the younger years, are you expecting him to wave a magic wand and to build a lifestyle, that you want, that took your parents and your grandparents 3 and 4 generations to build? Is that the case? So these are some questions that I want to lay out before you in your thinking that you need to question for yourself before you drive or continue to drive or adapt thinking, adapt points of view that will drive your man completely out of your life for him not to return. And don't think for a minute that the grass is going to be greener on the other side of the fence. Because if it is, there are going to be weeds in that grass, there's going to be bugs in that grass, there's going to be spiders in that grass, there's going to be snakes in that grass, and the grass is going to have to be maintained just like it is now in your current relationship. If you want to drive your man out of your life, undermine his work. What do I mean by that? Well, let's get into the other things and we'll kind of wrap the other things around that idea. Undermine his work. If you want a certain kind of house, if you want to drive a certain kind of car, if you want to have a certain kind of relationship and raise certain kind of kids in your relationship, undermine your man and undermine his work. So in the 10 Commandments, which are about 30 actually, do not back your man up. Make sure that your man is always wrong in his work. Make sure he's always wrong in his endeavors. And make sure he is always wrong in everything he does. And to go along with that, do not encourage your man. And by encourage, I do not mean nag him. That's not encouragement. Do not hold him in high esteem. Make sure that your boss is above your man. Make sure that your boss's word and opinion and thoughts and authority is above your man. Do not hold your man in high esteem. Undermine your man. Do not encourage your man. Encourage your boss, but don't encourage your man. Do not stay calm and peaceful and quiet. Constantly yell at your man. Constantly raise your voice to your man. Constantly show him that you are irritated in every situation. Do not be committed to your man or your husband. Be committed to your job. Not that you shouldn't be committed to your job, but understand that the job is to serve the family. The family is not to serve the job. And the same is true in business. The business is to serve the family. The family is not to serve the business. So that goes back to undermining his work. If you want the business, if you want the work to serve the family, just don't undermine his work. If you want him to serve his work, undermine everything. Undermine his business. Undermine his work. And he will put his efforts solely into his work, but not the family. And some of these things I'm going to come back to from the biblical point of view. I'm going to touch on them again. Do not be your best. Do not do your best. Only be and do the minimum required. Be a lazy slob. Don't be desirable. Be less desirable than the women around him at work. Be less desirable than the neighbor next door. Be less desirable than the ladies at church. Be less desirable than the ladies in the organizations that you frequent. Don't be your best. And don't be committed to him. Don't leave and cleave your parents. Be sure that you jump higher for your parents than you do for your husband. Be sure that you're more committed to your parents than you are your husband. Don't speak straight with your husband. mince your words, beat around the bush. Be sure that what you say is never specific so that he can never follow or keep up with what you're saying, so that you can manipulate things to get your way. Rather than just speak your desires so that your husband has a want to fulfill your desires and give you what you want because he loves you. Do not speak straight. This is the second part. But be flattering, beguiling, and cunning, and conning, and manipulative. And by straight, I don't mean sharp. I mean straight. By straight, I don't mean with that edge in your voice. And you can see where a lot of these things apply to the man as well. But we're not talking about the man. We're talking about how you drive your man out of your life. Do not respect his time at work. What do I mean by that? By that, I don't mean don't call him. But bombard him. Don't respect his time at work. But when he's in the middle of things and he can't do anything about anything, specific, frivolous things, call him, bombard him with useless calls so that he can't get anything done, so that you are undermining his work. Let him know you expect him to solve silly little things that can't be solved over the phone while he is doing his job, conducting business, or doing his work. Make sure that when you call him about silly, frivolous things, that you expect him, that he knows that you expect him to fix whatever it is and to fix it right now while he's at work. Now, I'm not talking about wanting to hear his voice and just saying, hey, look, I miss you. Can't wait to see you at home. I love you. Have a good day at work. Bye. Or, hey, you doing anything? Can you talk a little bit? And when you do need to work or you got to get back on it, just let me know and, we'll talk at home. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when he is in the middle of stuff and he's in the middle of stuff and the baby won't quit crying, or you let the little munchkins just wreak havoc and you expect him to solve things on the phone instead of being the wife, being the mother, and taking care of business. You just call him. When he says, look, I'm working, I can't do nothing about it. Okay, hang up. 30 seconds later, call him again. A minute later, call him again. 2 minutes later, call him again. Don't respect his time at work. And then expect him to continue to bring home the bacon without getting fired. And then when he's not at work, don't respect his downtime. Push him to his limits. Push him to beyond his limits. Make sure that you know that he is not meeting expectations for work, for money, for finance, for relationship, for emotion, for feelings, or for raising whatever it is. Just make sure he knows he's fallen short in no uncertain terms. And when he's relaxing so that he can rejuvenate to do the things that are needing to be done, whether it's the honey-do list or just projects that he knows need to be done, make sure that when he's resting, you're on his case. Don't let him rest. Oh, 20 minutes is up. Get out of bed. Get off the easy chair. Don't let him rest. Don't respect his downtime. Wear this man out completely like a used pair of socks or jeans. Don't let him wear the pants in the family. Don't let him make decisions. He is not capable of thinking through subjects or topics or issues. Do not let him wear the pants in the family. Make sure that you demasculine him. Demasculate him? Demasculate him? I'm not sure I know the right word for that. But make sure he doesn't wear the pants in the family. Make sure he knows that you wear the pants in the family and you will make the decisions. But when you screw up, make sure that he knows that he's going to fix your screw ups because he is the man of the family. Ladies, you can't have it both ways. Just so you know that. It's either one way or the other. And I'm not saying you can't work together. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can't have mutual authority and mutual respect and solve things mutually. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about how to drive your man out of your life. Command him at every step. Make sure that he knows that you're in charge because he is a stupid dimwit. And he can't keep anything straight. Run your husband, run his work, run his business into the ground. Just do it. Just remember, you're going to get what you want. Or let me rephrase it. You're not going to get what you want. You're going to get what you ask for. Always second guess your husband. And again, I'm not saying don't say, hey, what about this or what about that? That's not what I'm saying. But when you second guess your husband and he's thought things through for the betterment of you and him and the family, make sure that he knows that he really is stupid. When it comes to having his friends over or other friends over, make sure that you are more excited to see them than you are him when he comes home. Make sure that when the doorbell rings that you jump over the back of the couch or the side of the chair to grab the door. But when he comes home, just kind of glance over your shoulder and say, I see you're home. You look like a rat drug you in. Man, you stink. Be sure that you pay more attention and you're more excited to see his friends than you are him. When you do have something for him to do, give him a list and let him work through the list. Oh, wait, let me put this in another way. To drive your man out of your life, don't let him work through the list. Before he starts on a project, a repair, or whatever needs to be done, make sure that he knows that he's 3 steps behind and there's at least 4 or 5 other projects that he needs to get done at the same time before you let him begin on the first one. Just so that he knows that he can't rest. Just so that he knows that the work is never done. And that you want all of it to get done right now. And when he is on those projects, be sure that you supervise everything he does, especially the things that you don't know anything about. Make sure that you tell him what to do before he gets it done, before he starts, or in the middle of it, especially when you don't know what in the world you're talking about. And don't let him work through the steps that are needed to get done what needs to be done correctly. And don't let him do it to his best, but make sure that it's just sloppily done so that it gets done. And then when it is done sloppy, let him know that it just isn't right. When he does get home from work or from his business or from travels for business or whatever it is, don't let him get out of the car. Don't let him put a foot in the house before you scream things that he needs to be aware of or that he needs to do. Make sure that he needs to know before he even opens his car door that he's got to discipline little Johnny or Petey or whoever it is, because you didn't discipline him through the day and you let him run wild and commit murder. Because you're just going to let him wait till he gets home so that his little munchkin only sees him as the disciplinarian and not the loving provider and father of your children. You understand what's going on there? Make sure that he, as soon as he walks in the door, has to whoop that kid in the line, shape him up, so that's all that kid remembers of his father. Because you didn't take care of disciplining the children. Now let's get into some nitty-gritty stuff. And I'm going to come back over some of these things and really hone in on them so that we understand exactly where we need to come from. Do not give yourself to your man. Do not give yourself completely to your man. Make sure that you don't give him sex because you want him to know you're not interested and you're not happy with him. And this goes along with being more excited that his friends come over than he comes home. You understand what I'm saying? Make sure that you use sex to manipulate him to get what you want. And then as soon as you give him what he wants so you can get what you want, shut it down. Make sure that you use sex to punish him or to get even with him. I'm going to come at this from a biblical point of view because there's plenty of you that do this. Don't tell me you don't. Don't tell me you haven't. And I'm not talking about the man here. The man has, I'm going to show you, the man has his fair share. But I'm talking about how to drive your man out of your life forever. Whether he's in the home, disenfranchised, divested, distant, whatever it is, or flat out gone. Or he becomes divorce material because you don't understand these things or you flat don't care. Don't forgive him when he does screw up. Because your man is the only man that should be perfect. Thank God my wife forgives me. Thank God she is a forgiving woman. I tell you what, my wife Sherry, whoo! Now she has her faults, I have my faults, but thank God she is a forgiving woman. I could not ask for more of a forgiving woman. Do not be a virtuous woman. Do not be honorable. Be a manipulative, lying, conniving, dishonest, non-loving, non-respectful wench. Do not be gracious or classy. be rough, rude, and trashy. Some of these things overlap. And like I said, I'm going to come back at these from a different angle so that you understand the flip side of what it should be, not from my point of view, but from God's point of view. Don't be an excellent wife. Be subpar. And notice that it doesn't say a woman. This is in Proverbs 12:4. We're going to get into that. Be rotten. Kind of goes with don't be gracious. Don't be an excellent wife. Don't be a gracious or classy wife, but be rough, rude, and trashy. Just flat be rotten to the core. We've all seen them. I've watched women ride their man into Walmart, into the grocery store, like he is a stray dog. That's the kind of woman you want to be if you want to drive your man out of your life. Don't be a home builder. Be a home wrecker. Think about that. They all overlap. This is huge. This next one is huge in light of the fact that psychologists and psychiatrists will always tell you to do what makes you happy, and that the husband should do whatever it is that the wife wants to make her happy. In other words, and preachers are falling prey to this too, as they use psychology and psychiatry over the Word of God, particularly in their counseling. Or even when they preach, and they preach about how virtuous women are, or not that they should be, but that they are, and that men are always at fault and always have responsibility and women don't. But don't realize that your man wants you, wants a relationship with you, wants to be emotionally and physically and spiritually in tune with you and have a relationship with you internally as much as you do, if not more. And that is what drives his physical desire for you. And let me be straight. And if you've got children listening, send them away, plug their ears right now. And don't understand that this is the drive for the man's sexual desire to physically be engaged with you and literally be inside of you, because he wants to connect with you on a inward, spiritual, physical, and emotional plane. Don't understand that. Just listen to the shrinks. Just think that the man is driven by sight alone. Not that that isn't important for the man, but don't understand that he is a much more deep being than what shrinks tell you he is. He's not just a savage beast that has a physical lust, and then when you give him your physical self, he just wipes his mouth and just charges on with life, not thinking about you as a person anymore. That may be, and understand that a younger man may operate on those terms specifically, and not in a marriage. In a marriage, he's already made his commitment to you, and he is invested in you in a whole being, body, soul, and spirit. And when he is young and not committed, That's how he operates more times than not. Unless he is showing signs that he wants to be committed to you. And by my observation, it is women who are more apt to be the jump 'em, pump 'em, and dump 'em, love 'em and leave 'em variety more than the man. And to be fair, the statistics of divorce of women initiating and divorcing 70% more than the man would back my thoughts up. Now, let's get into the other side of this for a little bit. If you have your Bible with you, let's begin to understand a few things. I need to find my glasses so I can actually read something here. Here goes Tim. Here he goes. He's so wise. No, I just observe and I read. Okay, so let's take a look at a few things. In Genesis chapter 2, we find this. And I'm going to get into the submission part, and I'm going to help you understand something that's very, very important. And you're not going to like the initial thing that is said because people are teaching you incorrectly. But once you understand what I'm teaching you, I think you will understand that it is vital that you change your thinking. So in Genesis chapter 2, we go back to the initiation of God creating man and woman. And he has created the garden. And he gave the man, Adam, the job to subdue and to be a master over or a steward of God's creation. That is, to work. To conduct business and to work over the things that God created. Understand that this is a big thing about work. So when I say undermine his business and undermine his work, you are undermining his call to be a servant and a steward over the things that God has called him to do and be. And therefore, when you do that, you are fighting not only your man and his ability to provide for you the things that you would like, and the lifestyle that you would like to maintain, and the relationship that you would like to have, but you are fighting against God himself, because God is working through your man to do what God has called him to do in the business that God has called him to be in. Do you understand that? Get that in your head. Genesis chapter 2. And the Lord God fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from man, and brought her to the man. Okay, side note. Women or men, you do not need to be anxious for finding a woman. but take your time and be who you are supposed to be, taking care of what God has told you to take care of, and He will bring the woman to you. God fashioned a woman into a woman, the rib which He had taken from man, and brought the woman, or brought her to the man. And the man said, wow, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh, one body. That is mind, soul, strength, flesh, purpose, in unity and in goal. The word helpmeet means, as in 1 Timothy, as in Titus, as in 1 Peter chapter 3, to come alongside and to help. Just like Jesus said, He would send the Comforter, the Helper, the Holy Spirit, to help man. So in my statements before, when you are to encourage your husband, and I said it in the flip side, don't encourage your husband, and don't submit to your husband. We're going to get into the submission thing in a minute, but don't let him wear the pants. Do you understand that when you yield yourself up to your husband so that he can be who he is supposed to be as the head of your home and the leader of your home, that you can't give anything up that you don't have? Stop and think about that for just a moment. When God calls you to be the helper, do you understand the importance of this position? Because as God is the head of the home, or as God is the head of the home, and the head of the husband and the wife, the head of the family, and the husband is the head of the wife, that if you weren't in that position, you would have nothing to yield. And things are to be in order. And if you have nothing to yield, that means you have nothing of importance. But because you are called to submit to your husband, I'm going to get into this stuff. Because you are called to be the helpmeet, and because you have this position, it means that it is of utter importance. And if it wasn't, God wouldn't call you to do it. Do you also understand that from a military point of view and a point of order, that in order for somebody to be in charge, they also have to be in a position of submission somewhere? So let's just say, and let me put this out there, when I was in the Army and I was a private and I took orders, and I took orders from a corporal, or I took orders from a sergeant or a staff sergeant or a sergeant first class or a lieutenant or a captain or a major or a colonel or a light bird colonel or a colonel or a general, that every one of those people that told me to do something to carry out an order got their orders from somebody else, that was in charge of them. And they were not on a power trip. It is just that orders had come down and things needed to be done. And this person, as a colonel, as a major, as a captain, as a lieutenant, as a master sergeant, sergeant first class, staff sergeant, sergeant, corporal, private first class, private E3, private E1, they all had a task to do in the overall job to complete the end goal. And so it is with a husband and wife that if you want to complete the relationship, we all have a job to do. We all have positions to take. We all have a job to do to strive to meet the end goal. And if your job as a woman and as a wife was not important, God would not call you to operate in it in the way that He does. He would call you to something different. Your role in the relationship is vital, absolutely imperative, extremely important, which makes your value right even with your man. So if you are a woman of wisdom and a woman of godliness and a woman of virtue and a classy woman, then you would in fact not drive your man out of your life. But you would operate in such a manner that you would be of high esteem in his eyes, that you would be desirable, and that you would be valuable, and that he would hold you in the highest esteem more than anybody else, except for Almighty God. Higher than children, higher than parents, higher than work, higher than the neighbors, higher than people at church. You are that one equal in that relationship that has been put together by God. So we see this in Genesis chapter 2 in verse 20. And it doesn't say that God put Eve in charge. It says He made her the helper for Adam so that he could do what he is called to do. Both of those jobs are utterly and completely equal in value, yet different. Now, let's take a look at some other passages. Let's take a look at do not be gracious or classy, or should we say be an excellent wife, be an excellent woman. And notice, let's go to Proverbs chapter 12 for just a moment. Okay? Proverbs chapter 12. In Proverbs chapter 12, we see in verse 4 this: an excellent or a virtuous wife is the crown of her husband, but she who shames him is as rottenness to his bones. Do you want to know why your husband, if this is the case, your husband runs around the house with the tail between his legs, or looks like the rat drug in another rat, or he tangled with a hyena or a lion or a grizzly bear all the time, and he doesn't keep himself up? Read Proverbs 12, verse 4. How about do not be gracious or classy? Let's go back to chapter 11 and look at verse 12. And this is related. Actually, that's wrong. I wrote down the wrong passage. Scratch that. Proverbs 14:1. Be a home wrecker, not a home builder. Or do not be a home builder, but be a home wrecker. Proverbs 14:1. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. Do you want to know why you struggle with accomplishing a relationship and a lifestyle that you desire? Maybe it's because you're a home wrecker rather than a home builder. And this is on all of the levels that I've discussed so far. And understand that we also know that unless the Lord builds the house, they that labor, labor in vain. Therefore, the wise woman builds her house, the foolish tears it down with her own hands. Notice it doesn't say the man does. It says the woman does. Proverbs 12:18 and 21. Proverbs 12:18. There is one who speaks rashly, like the thrust of a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips will be established forever, but a lying tongue is only for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil. No harm befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal faithfully are his delight. So, are you one who speaks straightforwardness, or are you one who always has an edge to your voice, who speaks as a sword that is thrust into the heart? Proverbs 15:1 and 2. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable, but the mouth of fools spouts folly. And here again, being in submission or being a helpmeet does not mean you don't give your 2 cents. But a gentle answer turns away wrath, harsh words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable. Are you a woman who helps to bring knowledge to the topic and subject at hand, and out of your graciousness and your classiness and your virtue, makes the knowledge that you bring to the table acceptable rather than demeaning. And we men can take note of this as well. I know there are times when I don't follow this admonition. But right now we're talking about how to drive your man out of your life. And then, of course, we know about Proverbs 31, when the woman is industrious. I'm not going to go into that. You can look at it yourself. Proverbs 27, 15, and 16. And there are multiple passages that speak this. A constant dripping on a day of steady rain and a contentious woman are alike. Drip, 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 drip. Nag, 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 nag. A dripping faucet is useless. It is a leak. It is not channeled water. Channeled water is useful for a lot of things. For quenching thirst, for providing water to cook with, for providing water to wash, bathe, and shower with, for refreshment, for cleansing, for healing, for sustainment. But drip, 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 drip does nothing of the sort. It is actually something that will drive you out of your mind. If you want to drive your man out of your life, be a nagging, mind-bending drip. He who restrains her restrains the wind and grasps oil with his right hand. Don't be a drip. Be fresh water that soothes, that comforts, that relaxes, that relieves, that heals, that quenches thirst. Be that woman. Now, let's get into some New Testament passages for just a moment. I apologize, I have to check my phone because I have other work that I'm chasing. Okay, there's nothing there. So in Ephesians chapter 4, let's turn to Ephesians chapter 4. In Ephesians chapter 4, in verse 29, to go along with what Proverbs says, and this is speaking to everybody in general, but we're talking about how to drive your man out of your life, or in reverse psychology, how not to, but how to build your house rather than be a house wrecker with your own hands. So, in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29, it says, "Let no unwholesome or rotten word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification according to the need of the moment, that it may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption." Just throwing that out there. And then Ephesians chapter 5, we get into marriage, verses 22 through 24. "Wives, be subject or yield to your own husbands as to the Lord." Don't yield to your husband's friends. Don't yield to the neighbor. Don't yield to the boss in as much as he maintains a relationship over your husband. And I'm not saying don't do what your boss says at work. That's a whole nother topic about women in the workplace or whatever. And if your husband says that job's not good for you because it's not good for us, or it's not good for you and it's not good for us, maybe you should listen to your husband and not worry so much about what your boss says. But maybe you should be subject to your husband. Remember the analogy that I drew about the military rank and order and being able to take orders as well as give them? And the husband needs to be able to take orders as well as give them. He takes orders from the Lord, should be anyways. And then what if he isn't? We're going to get into that. What if he is an ornery coot? For the husband is the head of the wife, hupotasso. He is the sergeant over the corporal. As Christ is the head of the church. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church, that he gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water of the word. Okay. 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter. We're not going to get into that. Titus chapter 2. Let's go to Titus chapter 2 for just a moment. Let's take a look at this. This has to do with being the house builder rather than the house wrecker. If I can get there. In Titus chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. Let's start in verse 3 because it just goes into verse 4 and 5. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious, gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good, that they may encourage the younger women to love their husbands, to love their children. See, in Ephesians it says, husbands, love your wives. Here it says, the women or wives are to love their husbands. So that's a two-sided coin. It's a two-way door. And be sensible, pure, workers at home. Your energy is to go into building your home rather than wrecking your home with your own hands. Kind, being subject to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be dishonored. You see, it's just like I said in Genesis chapter 2, when you undermine your man's work, you are undermining God working through your man. And just as you are not subject to your own husband, and as it is here, being a worker at home or putting your best energy and your best efforts and your best commitments into building your relationship and your home with your husband, but dividing your heart up, you are in fact wrecking your home with your own hands. Or at the very least, it is not the best that it can be or could be. And in so doing, here in verse 5 of Titus chapter 2, it says, the word of God is dishonored. And that goes right along with what we saw in Genesis chapter 2 and throughout Proverbs. So you say, what if that husband of mine that I chose because of his qualities is less than desirable? Well, number one, why did you choose that man then? But let's say he is just ornery and not who he is supposed to be, because there is plenty of those cases as well. I mean, we could get into that aspect, and rightly so. What are you to be? Why are you, not to be a nag? So in looking at 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, we see this. Well, it comes out of Christ being the sacrifice for the church and what the man is supposed to be and the authority structures of life. And then it goes into chapter 3 and it says, in the same way, wives, you wives, be submissive. There's that hupotasso again, that order and rank, to your own husbands, so that even if any are disobedient to the word, that is, if your husband is not following God's call on his life or being who he is supposed to be, you can divorce him. You can trash talk him. You can talk sharply with him. You can be rottenest to his bones. You should drive him mad. You should whoop him to the core. You should, and the list goes on and on, all the don't do things that I went through in the beginning of this video. No, it says, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, that they may be won without a word by your behavior as a wife, as his wife. Do you see, again, why it's so important to understand the value of your position of you as a helpmeet? Let's put this into a slightly different perspective. This goes back to Galatians chapter 6. In restoring one another. But it's even more important, being that it is specifically talking about the relationship between husband and wife. Brethren, if a man is caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, looking to yourself, lest you too be tempted, bearing one another's burdens, and thus fulfill the law of Christ. In Philippians chapter 2, be imitators of God as beloved children, walk in love as Christ loved you, gave himself up for us an offering and a sacrifice to God as a free aroma. So the point is, and then it goes into women be subject to your own husbands. And so you, wives, win your husband without a word. Why? By your behavior. So that he sees that he is dishonoring the word of God, and that his relationship with God is restored, and that he begins to follow God's call on his life. And you guys can move forward in building the home together. Do not let your ornament be merely external, braiding of hair or wearing gold and jewelry or putting on the dresses, but let it be the hidden person of the heart. Remember, a virtuous, classy woman. And these things are imperishable qualities, and of gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. You want God to work in your man and work through you? This is how you do it. And this is how you don't drive your man out of your life. And this is how you maintain and restore your relationship with your man and the two of you with the Lord. Now, I'm not saying this is a magic wand and it happens instantaneously. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying at some point God will honor you. And then if he leaves and divorces you, then the weight is on his shoulders, and his disobedience will eat him physically and spiritually and in soul, body, and spirit, and he will suffer the consequences in this life and in the life to come, whether you see it or not. Now, let's talk about using sex as a manipulation, a punishment, to get what you want. Jump them, pump them, and dump them. Love them and leave them. Let's talk about that for just a moment. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And remember what I said about your man wanting you, the spiritual and the soul, as well as the physical connection. Now concerning things about which I wrote you, 1 Corinthians 7, verse 1, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, and this is before he's married, but because of immoralities, let each have his own wife. Touch your own wife. Don't touch any other woman. Touch your own wife. And let each woman have her own husband. Notice it doesn't say man, it says husband. In the other passages, actually, though, the word husband is gender specific to a man. And woman is gender specific, that is a woman. And that should be noted as well. But that's for another video. Let the husband fulfill his duty to his wife, sacrificial, sustainment, stability, and taking care of his responsibilities of providing, and also of protecting. Let the husband fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The gender-specific word is aner and gune. Husband, man, aner, and wife, woman, gune. That way you know we're not talking about Steve and Adam or Eve and Jill or whatever. We're talking about Adam and Eve. We're talking about man and woman. That's specific words, specific genders, specific pleasing of God. Specific husband and wife. The wife does not have authority over her husband, but the husband does. And likewise, also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. So stop depriving one another, and this is of fulfillment, of pleasure, stop depriving one another except by agreement for a time. That is a specific time, that is a temporary time, that is a short time, that you may devote yourself to prayer and then come together again, lest Satan tempt you, and because of your lack of self-control. So, and Paul here recognizes that all men and women have a lack of self-control, which is why we need to submit ourselves to God, to His Word, so that we don't dishonor God, dishonor His Word, that we're not house wreckers, but we're house builders, and we invest in each other. And physically, we don't manipulate one another. If we are giving one another to each other, there is absolutely no need to manipulate one another in the sexual fulfillment and role of a husband and wife, because we are fulfilling one another, and we are fulfilling one another emotionally, feelings, spiritually, and physically as we submit to each other. And because why would you deprive your own self if you're one flesh with your man and the man with his wife? But why would you be a manipulative, conniving, cantankerous drip if you understand that you are one with your husband, and in tearing your house down, in tearing your husband down, in undermining your husband, in being manipulative and withholding yourself, in not being desirable and not being virtuous, you are tearing yourself down by tearing your husband down. And like I said, you will get what you ask for rather than what you want. And what you ask for is exactly what your behavior will be if it doesn't match what you want. Does that make sense? Stop depriving one another. The two shall become one flesh. The two shall become one flesh. Do you not know that by how you treat your man, you are in fact treating your own self? Same is true for the husband. Now let's take this from a different angle for a moment. Let's just take it from a different angle for a moment. Because we have been bombarded with, we just need to be happy. Okay? Turn to Matthew chapter 5, and let's take this from a happy point of view. Matthew 5 and Matthew 6. And this is not pertaining specifically to marriage, but I'm going to make an illustrating point. In Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 3, if you don't mind. In Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 3. Well, God just wants me to be happy. Oh, really? It's not that God doesn't want you to be happy, but He wants you to be content. He wants you to be fulfilled. He wants you to be complete. He wants you to have your needs met, and He wants you to understand the difference between wants and needs. And for you to put on your husband's shoulders your wants over your needs is going back to having a lack of understanding and a lack of commitment and a lack of the difference of knowledge and wisdom between wants and needs. And I'm not saying there aren't physical wants. I'm not saying there aren't material or needs or material needs. There are. But you can't convolute the wants and the needs because there is a difference. So when we say, oh, God just wants me to be happy, let's take a look at this. And we see this being preached in the Beatitudes. Verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Happy is the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Oh, you're just so happy when you mourn, because they shall be comforted. Well, how are they happy when they're poor in spirit, when theirs is the kingdom of heaven, or when they shall be comforted? They're not comforted right now, so they're really happy. Oh, they're happy because they know that 15 years from now they're going to be comforted. That doesn't make sense. Blessed are those, or happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. They shall be. You see, there's a difference between being peaceful and being content and being fulfilled. Being blessed by God and being fulfilled in all of these aspects, being content and at peace and rejoicing in Him, as in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verses 6 through 9, Ephesians chapter 6, versus being happy, versus being holy, versus being virtual. There's a big difference. And there's a big difference between being happy and being blessed by God on substantial things versus things that are revolving around your circumstances. And it's the difference between being happy versus happenstance versus being full of joy and contentment and peace based on who you are in Christ and His blessings from the inside out. The material blessings will follow eventually, but God is more concerned about the spiritual and the internal, and we confuse and convolute the two all the time. And we do it because we preach these things right here wrong. And the same goes for when we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, when we are not to deprive one another or use these things to manipulate one another, knowing that God will reward us later. Same thing in 1 Peter chapter 3, when you win your husband without a word. Without a word. By your chaste and virtuous and classy and wise and godly behavior. Eventually, the man will be put to shame. Now, let's understand this as well. And when we talk about the difference between winning, being subject to your husband, being yielding to your husband. Remember, I said, if you don't have it to yield, you can't yield. Which means being the person you're supposed to be is extremely important. That way you give yourself to your husband as his soulmate and helpmeet and encourager and builder. And you build him so that you can work together to the common goal of what you're called to be and to do. But if you can't yield it, if you don't have it, you can't yield it. Which means that what you have and what you are supposed to be is so valuable. And if you don't understand these things, then you will most likely miss the mark in how you are to operate. And you will drive your husband, unless he has utter fortitude and is the man he is supposed to be and lives under the weight of a contentious woman, that being you, of a rotten woman, that being you, unless he is utterly strong, you will drive him out of your life. Now, we went through the book of Proverbs, and I want you to understand this. I'm not picking on the woman. I'm just saying 70% of divorces begin and end with women. It is a statistic global fact. And if you want to be successful in your marriage, you need to own how you handle yourself, even if your husband does not handle himself the way he is supposed to handle himself. 1 Peter or 2 Peter chapter 3. No, 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. Proverbs. And understand that just like I told my wife, don't expect me to explain to God why I did not allow you to wear the pants. When I stand before him, don't expect for me to explain why I didn't allow that I didn't wear the pants in the family. That's not going to happen. And it's not because I'm a brute of a ruler. It's because there is order in marriage, and I intend to fulfill my station in life before God. And not that I'm perfect in it. I'm not. And not that men are perfect in it. We are not. And to understand that in Proverbs, for every verse that I have showed you in Proverbs pertaining to the woman, it looked to me like there were 10 to 15 to 20 verses that literally pertained to the man in how he's to conduct his life. If that's the case, why would you not submit to your husband and take on that so important role that God has deemed as his helpmeet? Why would you want to take on the weight of the position of standing before God and explaining to him why you fought tooth and nail to wear the pants in the family, to be in charge, to constantly be the drip, and do all the things that I recommended to do to drive the man out of your life versus build your home rather than being a house wrecker with your own hands? Why would you want to stand before God and explain to him why you took on the role of the man and not your own role, and you drove your man to lunacy out of your life? Why would you want to take on that weight? Ladies, it is not a light burden for a man who fears God to be the proper man that he is supposed to be. It's not a light weight. It is a heavy, it's light when take on me my yoke, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light, as he walks in the spirit and fruitfulness of God. But it's much lighter when you encourage him and uphold him and strengthen him by the power of God, and God uses you to accomplish the things that he is supposed to accomplish. It is much lighter for him. But the weight, the responsibility of the God-given weight is something that God never intended you to bear. But the man will do it gladly and willingly if you are who you are supposed to be. And the two of you can fulfill your relationship as husband and wife in such a way that marriage, and I'm not saying marriage overall will be a joy and fulfilling and worthwhile, and I'm not saying there won't be rough spots. Trust me, there will be rough spots. But in those rough spots, you both be who you're supposed to be. Don't drop the ball. And let me explain this. There was 13 years that my wife could not tell me she loved me. And it was difficult. And I'm not saying that that I was the perfect husband. But she had forces on her that made it difficult for her to be all that she was supposed to be, and to make commitment within her own heart and mind. Though she never stepped out of the bounds of marriage, it was a difficult thing for her. And yet, and my whole point is that she remained faithful, I remained faithful, and we worked through it, and at the end of it all, it was well worth us working through all of our issues so that now we can continue to enjoy each other and the relationship that we have. And I'm not saying we don't have issues. We do. That which is most valuable to have, to build, and to maintain usually is also the most difficult and where the most energy needs to be focused. And that will never change. But when you are who you're supposed to be and you work through the issues that need to be worked through, I promise you at some point at the end of it all, it will be worth waiting it out and working through it. I know of a couple, he was a drunk for 4 decades or more, 3 decades, we'll say 3 decades. As long as I knew him, was around him, he was a drunk. And miserable to be around, and not that they were both who they were supposed to be, but you know what? In the end, they got their lives right before God, and they rejoiced in each other 30 years later. 40 years later, after working through the difficulties. And when God blesses that, it is so worth it, people. Lady, it is so worth being who you are supposed to be so that you can live in joy and build the house out of wisdom and knowledge and virtue rather than be a home wrecker, and rather than drive your man out of your life. I hope that this particular video is of help to you. I ask you, ladies and men alike, to add your 2 cents. And understand, I'm not saying be perfect, and I'm not saying you don't go through difficulty. And I'm not saying the man isn't who he's not, that who he is, who he's supposed to be. I'm not saying that at all. Men carry plenty of weight and blame, so don't misunderstand me. But if you have wisdom, if you have difficulties to share, and you have wisdom of working through things from a biblical point of view, please share them so that others can be encouraged and grow. And I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I don't care if you're a pastor or not. I don't care if you're I don't care whoever you are. If you have insights that we have missed, I have missed, please share them and encourage one another. Build a community of ironing, sharpening iron, of admonishing one another, shooting straight with one another. Add your 2 cents to the pie. Please. I'm just one person. Add your 2 cents to the pie. And take a look at what I've said. And if it needs further explaining or better explaining, please add your explanations. If I need correcting, please correct what I have said, because I'm only one person. Always check what I say. Always. If this particular video has been of benefit to you, then I sincerely ask that you go to YouTube and that you like and subscribe, that you share it with those who you think will be encouraged, and also please go to my Etsy page and help to support me by taking a look at my, come on now, oh you crazy silly thing, well I guess it doesn't want to do that, to my Etsy page. And in so doing, I thank you for all your consideration. I thank you for sticking out this video, sticking with me, and I just hope and pray that it will have been a great encouragement and benefit to you. And with that, I will see you on the next video.